Ever walked into a room and noticed people suddenly getting quiet? Or maybe you've caught someone staring at you with this strange mix of respect and nervousness, like they're trying to figure you out, but also a little bit afraid of what they might find. If you're an INFJ, you've probably experienced this more than once. And here's the thing that most people don't talk about. It's not actually your fault. There's real science and psychology behind why your presence can feel so intense to the people around you. So let's dive into what's really going on, and more importantly, why this isn't something you need to feel bad about. 1. The intensity behind your eyes. The first thing people pick up on isn't usually something you're doing intentionally. It's how you see the world. INFJs don't just look at people, you actually observe them. You're reading facial expressions, picking up on tone shifts, noticing when someone's saying one thing but clearly feeling something completely different. That kind of attention is rare, and honestly, it can make people uncomfortable. Most people go through their day on autopilot, not really looking closely at what's happening around them. But you're constantly processing. You're absorbing details about people's emotional states, their contradictions, their hidden motivations. It's like you've got this invisible X-ray vision that cuts through the usual social noise. When someone looks into your eyes and realizes you're actually seeing them, not just looking at them, it triggers something. Some people find it comforting because, deep down, everyone wants to be truly seen. But others feel exposed, like you might uncover something they've been hiding, even from themselves. This intense observation style comes from how INFJ brains are wired. You've got dominant introverted intuition, which means you're constantly forming patterns and predictions about human behavior. You're running these complex mental simulations in the background, thinking 3 steps ahead about where conversations are going and what people really mean beneath their words. It's not that you're trying to read minds, you're just naturally gifted at it. The thing is, this intensity in your gaze can scare people because they sense you're not easily fooled. You can detect when someone's being fake or performing, and people know that about you, even if they can't quite explain why. That kind of authenticity detector makes a lot of folks nervous because so much of social interaction is built on small performances and acceptable pretenses. 2. You seem too put together in an uncomfortable way. Here's something interesting. INFJs often appear calmer and more collected than they actually feel on the inside. You've got this ability to maintain composure even when you're internally freaking out. This creates this interesting paradox where people sense 2 things at once. This outer piece combined with what feels like deep, turbulent waters underneath. Think about it from their perspective. You're the person who doesn't lose their cool easily. You're thoughtful and measured in your responses. You don't engage in shallow gossip, and when you do talk, you say meaningful things. That's admirable, but it's also intimidating. People can sense that there's more going on beneath the surface, and they don't always feel equipped to go that deep. It's like you're operating at a different frequency than most casual social interaction. The way you regulate your emotions makes you seem almost too composed. Most people have visible emotional breakdowns now and then, which is actually comforting to others because it makes you seem human and accessible. But INFJs are so good at managing their internal chaos that people might wonder if you even feel things deeply. Ironically, the opposite is true. You feel everything deeply, but you've developed this sophisticated system of processing and containing those feelings so they don't explode outward. This restraint reads as a kind of mysterious distance. People don't always know if you like them, if you're judging them, or if you're simply existing in your own complex inner world. That uncertainty is what creates the intensity. They can sense depths they can't quite access, and that's both fascinating and frightening. 3. You hold people accountable without saying a word. One of the biggest reasons INFJs can seem intimidating is something you probably don't even realize you're doing. You hold a high standard for authenticity and integrity, and you communicate that just by existing. You don't even need to lecture anyone or point out their flaws. Your mere presence seems to call people toward their better selves, and that's actually kind of threatening to people who aren't ready to be their best. Here's what happens. When you're around, people get more conscious of their own behavior. They notice their own contradictions more acutely. They feel like they should be better because something in your demeanor suggests that better is possible. That's not you being judgmental. That's just you radiating authenticity, and it acts like a mirror. Some people appreciate that. Others find it exhausting or accusatory, even when you've done nothing wrong. You've got this quiet integrity about you. You don't cut corners ethically. You don't pretend to be someone you're not. You call out bullshit when you see it, not in a mean way, but in a way that's impossible to dismiss. People can feel that about you, and it puts them on edge. They worry you're evaluating them. And in a way, you always are, not judgmentally, but honestly. You're always assessing whether people's actions align with their values, whether they're being genuine or phony. This quiet accountability is powerful precisely because it's not aggressive. It's not like someone yelling at you about your mistakes. It's more subtle than that. It's the feeling you get when you're around someone who clearly sees through pretense and who wouldn't tolerate inauthenticity in themselves. So they're not going to tolerate it in others either. That's stabilizing for some people and deeply uncomfortable for others. 4. Your perceptiveness makes people uncomfortable. INFJs aren't just intuitive about the moment. You're intuitive about people's deeper patterns and motivations. You can sense when someone's headed for a mistake before they even realize it themselves. You pick up on conflicts brewing beneath the surface of relationships. You notice trends in people's behavior that they're completely oblivious to. This is genuinely useful information, but it can feel invasive to the people around you. Imagine knowing that someone can predict your behavior before you even act. Imagine sensing that they understand your emotional patterns and contradictions better than you do. That's powerful, and power makes people nervous. You're not using this gift to manipulate or control anyone. You just naturally see these things. But the sheer fact that you see them creates this asymmetry where you know more about people than they know about themselves, and that's uncomfortable territory. The worst part is when you're right about your perceptions. You might gently point out that someone's headed for disaster based on patterns you've noticed, and then it happens. You predicted it. Suddenly, you seem almost eerily accurate. People might start wondering if you're some kind of fortune teller or if you've got some supernatural ability to see the future. In reality, you're just really good at connecting dots that others miss. This perceptiveness also means you probably don't fall for social manipulation or games. You see through false charm quickly. You know when someone's trying too hard to impress you or when they're being inauthentic. That's great for your own protection, but it makes people nervous. They can't convince you of things that aren't true. They can't lean on their typical social strategies with you because you see right through them. 5. The INFJ paradox. You care deeply but seem distant. This might be the most contradictory thing about INFJs and why your presence creates such a mixed reaction. You care about people genuinely, deeply, intensely, but you also need a lot of space and distance. You're fiercely loyal and devoted to your inner circle, but you come across as cool or detached to most people. That paradox creates confusion and sometimes even hurt feelings. People might interpret your need for solitude as rejection. They might think you don't like them because you're not always available or because you retreat into your own world frequently. But the truth is, you're simply managing your emotional energy. You feel so much that you need regular breaks to process and reset. That's not coldness, that's survival. The thing that scares people is not knowing where they stand with you. Are you their friend or just someone who's politely tolerating them? Do you like them or are you judging them? Are you interested in deepening the connection or are you content to stay on the surface? Your mysteriousness leaves that question open, and a lack of clarity is what creates the tension. You're also selective about who you let in, and people sense that selectivity. You don't form superficial relationships just to fill social spaces. Every connection you make is intentional and evaluated. Some people find that refreshing. Others find it exclusionary. They might feel like they're being tested or that they have to prove themselves worthy of your friendship. That's the burden of having high standards. People either want to rise to the occasion or they resent feeling like they're being evaluated. 6. Your conversations go deeper than most people expect. Most social interaction is superficial. People talk about the weather, their jobs, what they did last weekend. But INFJs often naturally steer conversations toward meaning. You want to talk about what actually matters: values, fears, dreams, the things that keep people up at night. That shift from small talk to real talk can catch people off guard and make them nervous. Not everyone is ready to be vulnerable or honest. For a lot of people, small talk is a comfort zone precisely because it keeps things safe and shallow. When you come along and suddenly the conversation is about life purpose or what someone really wants or why they're afraid, some people get excited and grateful, but others feel ambushed. They didn't sign up to be that honest with someone today. You're also good at asking questions that go to the heart of things. You're not asking, "How was your weekend?" You're asking, "What did that experience teach you?" Or, "How did that make you feel?" Or, "What are you really afraid of?" These are real questions from a real person who actually wants to understand, not just make small talk. That's beautiful, but it's also intense. It can feel like too much, too fast, for people who are used to keeping interactions light. The depth of your thinking also comes through in how you process conversations after the fact. You're probably thinking about what someone said for days afterward, turning it over in your mind, connecting it to larger patterns you've noticed. When you bring this processing back into conversation, which you sometimes do, it can surprise people. You remember details and underlying meanings that they've long forgotten. Your memory for emotional nuance is striking and sometimes startling. 7. You have clear boundaries that people don't know how to navigate. INFJs need strong boundaries to maintain their well-being, and that need often shows up as what other people might interpret as rigidity or coldness. You know exactly where your lines are, and you enforce them quietly but firmly. If you've decided something is unacceptable, there's usually no negotiating that. People sense that immovability, and it can feel harsh. The thing about your boundaries is that they're usually based on deep moral or ethical principles, not just personal preference. You don't draw lines to be difficult. You draw them because you need them to feel okay. But other people might not understand why certain things are so important to you. Why can't you just be more flexible? Why do you have to make such a big deal out of it? They don't realize that your boundaries are connected to your core values and sense of integrity. When people test your boundaries, and they often do because they're not sure if you're serious, and you hold firm, it sends a clear message. You're not someone to push around. You're not someone who'll bend your values for approval or comfort. That kind of integrity is admirable, but it's also a little scary because it shows that you're not available to be manipulated or negotiated with. You're standing on solid ground, and that's rare. Your boundaries also create distance, which, again, people can interpret as coldness or rejection. You might be perfectly kind and warmly interested in someone's life, but if they want more from you than you're able to give, more availability, more emotional labor, more flexibility with your values, your boundary becomes visible and disappointing. Some people take that personally even though it has nothing to do with them. 8. You don't need approval, and that threatens people. Here's something that really gets under people's skin about INFJs. You're not desperately seeking their approval. You've got a strong internal compass, and while you might value others' perspectives, you don't need external validation to feel okay about who you are. That kind of self-sufficiency is both attractive and threatening. Most people operate with some level of approval seeking built into their social behavior. They monitor how they're being perceived. They adjust their presentation based on feedback. They feel good when people like them and bad when people don't. But INFJs have usually spent enough time in their own heads to develop a pretty solid sense of self that's not dependent on others' opinions. This independence reads as confidence, which is good, but it also reads as a kind of indifference to what others think, which can bother people. If someone criticizes you and you don't immediately crumble or become defensive, they might think you don't care about their opinion. In reality, you probably do consider what they've said. You just don't let their judgment determine your self-worth. That distinction is lost on most people. The freedom that comes from not needing approval actually makes you harder to control. You can't be manipulated through flattery or wounded pride. You won't compromise your values to fit in. You won't perform inauthentically just to make people comfortable. That's powerful and threatening because most social dynamics depend on some level of mutual approval seeking that creates leverage. You stepped outside that game, and that's unsettling. 9. Your loyalty feels like a test. INFJs are incredibly loyal to the right people. You'll go to the ends of the earth for someone you care about. But that loyalty is selective and earned, not given freely to everyone. People sense that distinction, and it creates pressure. They feel like they're either in your circle or out of it, and there's no middle ground. This selective loyalty can make people nervous because they don't always know what the criteria are for being on your good side. What will make you write someone off? What behaviors are deal breakers? People sense that you have standards and that failure to meet them could result in expulsion from your inner circle. That's a lot of pressure, especially for people who are used to being able to disappoint people and still maintain the friendship. The other side of your loyalty is that when you've decided someone isn't trustworthy or isn't right for your inner circle, it's almost impossible to change your mind. That makes people nervous too. They know that if they violate your trust or show themselves to be inauthentic, the relationship might be over. That kind of finality is scary. Most people are used to Messier relationships with more gray area and more room for repeated mistakes and forgiveness. Your loyalty also means you're probably always evaluating whether people deserve your energy and investment. Are they growing? Are they being authentic? Are they treating others with integrity? These ongoing assessments are invisible to others, but people can sense that you're measuring them somehow. That constant evaluation, even though it comes from a good place, creates a feeling of being perpetually tested. 10. The quiet power of your presence. There's something about the way INFJs occupy space that's just fundamentally different from how most people do it. You don't need to be the loudest person in the room to have the most impact. You don't need to command attention to get people to pay attention. There's a kind of quiet power about you that registers below the surface of consciousness. When you walk into a room, people notice, even if you're not doing anything to draw attention. There's an awareness of you, a shift in the energy. Some of that comes from the intensity of your presence that we've already talked about, but some of it is just the way your energy works. You're fully present. You're not scattered or distracted or trying to make a good impression through performance. You're just there, being yourself, and that genuineness is somehow magnetic. This quiet power can make you seem more authoritative than you're trying to be. People might assume you're more confident than you feel, or that you hold higher status than you actually do. Your opinions carry more weight because you don't give them lightly. Your words matter because you choose them carefully. You're not constantly filling silences with noise, so when you do speak, people listen. This quiet power also means you're not competing for attention or validation in the obvious ways that most people do. You're not trying to be the funniest or the smartest or the most impressive. You're just being yourself, and that self-assurance is unsettling to people who are used to the constant low-level competition for social status. Your refusal to compete can actually feel threatening because it suggests a level of security that most people don't have. 11. You see potential in people, and sometimes that burden is too much. INFJs have this gift of seeing potential in people, often potential they don't see in themselves. You can look at someone and envision who they could become if they worked on themselves or made certain changes. That's beautiful, but it can also be a burden for both you and them. For you, seeing someone's potential means you naturally want to help them reach it. You become invested in their growth. You offer guidance. You make suggestions. You gently push them toward their better selves. Sometimes that helps people genuinely improve and grow. But sometimes people resent it. They feel like you're not accepting them as they are. They feel judged for not living up to potential they didn't even know they had. This tendency to see potential also means you often attract people who are struggling, who are at crossroads, who are trying to figure out who they are. You become like a compass pointing toward their North Star. Some people find that invaluable, but others find it exhausting. They don't want to be a project. They don't want to feel like you're constantly evaluating whether they're making progress toward their potential. The other issue is that sometimes you care more about people's potential than they do. You see where they could go, and you're frustrated that they're not motivated to get there. That frustration can come through, even when you're trying to be supportive, and people might feel like you don't really like who they are right now. You like who you think they could become. 12. Your emotional landscape is too complex for most people. Finally, The most fundamental reason your aura can scare people is that your emotional life is just genuinely more complex than most people's. You're working with layers of intuition, past patterns, future possibilities, and deep feeling that other personality types just don't typically experience. That complexity shows up in your presence, and it can be intimidating. You're probably experiencing multiple emotions at once pretty frequently. You can feel deeply happy and deeply sad simultaneously. You can be excited about something while also feeling skeptical. You can love someone while also being disappointed in them. That emotional nuance is rich and mature, but it's also confusing to people who tend to experience emotions more distinctly and separately. People can sense that you're not easy to understand emotionally, and that's scary. They can't just assume that if you seem happy, you're happy, or if you seem withdrawn, you're sad. There's more going on. You're processing multiple layers of meaning and emotion, and people don't always know how to engage with that complexity. This emotional complexity also means you probably have big emotional needs, even if you don't express them openly. You need depth, authenticity, and meaningful connection. You need people who can handle the complexity and the nuance. Most people are simpler than that, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's just different. But when you're around, people can sense that you need more from them than surface-level pleasantries and cheerful banter. Conclusion. So here's the bottom line. Your aura scares people because you're different in some fundamental ways. You see more clearly. You feel more deeply. You think about things more complexly. You care about authenticity and integrity in ways that create consequences and accountability. You're not available for games or manipulation. You're not performing or pretending. You're genuinely, fully yourself, and that's rare and powerful, and for many people, a little bit scary. But here's what's important to understand. That scare factor isn't a flaw. It's not something you need to apologize for or tone down. Yes, your intensity makes some people uncomfortable. Yes, your perceptiveness can feel invasive. Yes, your high standards and strong boundaries can feel excluding. But these same qualities also make you someone who has real capacity to help people grow, to see them truly, to be genuinely loyal and present. The right people, the ones who are ready for what you're offering, won't find your aura scary. They'll find it comforting, inspiring, or beautifully challenging in the best way. They'll appreciate that you see them clearly. They'll value your authenticity. They'll respect your boundaries. They'll feel lucky to be in your circle. You don't need to soften yourself or make yourself smaller to be more acceptable to people. What you need is to find your people, the ones who get you, who aren't threatened by your depth, who want to engage with the complexity and the richness that you bring to the world. When you stop trying to make people comfortable and start surrounding yourself with people who celebrate who you are, everything shifts. Your intensity becomes magnetism. Your perceptiveness becomes wisdom. Your complexity becomes beauty. The world needs INFJs exactly as you are. So don't apologize for scaring people. Just be deliberate about who you let stay scared and who you actually let into the circle. That's where your real power lies.